I'm about to show you how I replaced the fan switch and the light switch that's inside this ceiling fan. First, I turned the fan off at the wall. I then did the optional step of removing the bulbs and the glass shades. This made me less likely to break them. I then opened up the housing by removing the 3 screws holding it together. The 2 screws next to the on-off switch did not need to be removed. The lower piece was then hanging down from the fan. Note that on mine, the fan switch is in the upper part and the light switch is in the lower part. Other types of fans will have them both in the lower part. I then removed the 2 wire nuts that were connecting the wires between the 2 pieces. Note that many of you will have connectors instead of wire nuts, so just pull those connectors apart. I now had access to both switches and began removing the fan one. I turned the nut that holds it from the outside. I also chose to remove the lower half of the chain so I can get that nut off of it. I then turned the switch over and took a look at the different colored wires coming out of it, and I also looked at the different markings next to those wires. I then made this diagram of how they were configured. It was then time to remove the switch from those 4 wires. There's a few different ways to do that. One is just to snip them off. Another is to pry apart the switch itself and remove the wires that way. But I chose a third option, which was to press the end of this little tool into each of the gaps where the wires go in and pull the wires out as I'm pressing. A tiny screwdriver would have also worked. I had to press very hard and at an angle. Then I removed the light switch that was on the other part, and that was much easier. I just unscrewed the nut and pulled the switch out, and one of its wires was in this wire nut here, and I just unscrewed the wire nut and pulled the wire out of the bundle. With both switches in hand, I went to the store and bought replacements. These new ones are pretty much an exact match of the old ones. I began installing the new fan switch. It had the same markings on the black part of it. Using my diagram, I pushed the wires into the proper holes on the side of the switch. They just snap into place with a little bit of force. I then put the switch into the hole and put the nut back onto it. For the light switch, I screwed the nut back on and then stuck one of its black wires into the wire nut. It didn't matter which of the 2 I stuck in there. I then put the other wire nuts back into place and joined up the 2 pieces. I then had to line up the 3 holes and put the screws back in. And then I put the bulbs and the shades back on. And that's it. If you found this video useful, please hit the like button.